Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we are replacing the battery cables on my Ram with the 6.7 Cummins. This truck has had a lot of battery issues over the last few years, and I finally figured out that the battery cables are the issue. So I picked up this kit from Gino's Garage, but it's actually from custombatterycables.com, and this is a really nice kit. So I'm going to start with a little unboxing here. They got these nice diagrams, a little part list, some return policy stuff that's not super important. And they were even nice enough to provide a little sample of no-locks here for the battery terminals. So with this we have 4 terminal protectors. 2 for each battery, obviously. And we also have 4 new battery terminals. And I really like these terminals. They're much more heavy duty than your typical auto parts store. You know, nothing fancy, just, a good heavy duty terminal clamp. This kit also has terminal boots, which is real nice. Definitely not a necessity, but a real nice to have. And then, of course, we have the wire. Individually tagged, real heavy-duty wire. The ring terminals are already crimped on there. You got heat shrink on everything. Just really well done. Really nice kit. And the reality is, this is nothing crazy. This is just taking the time to do things right. There's so much garbage aftermarket stuff out there. It's really nice to see a kit that actually is a quality, especially for these heavy-duty trucks. You can see here they even bundled these wires by group. These are all going to the same terminal, and they're all cut to the correct length. It's just excellent. So then we just have the other positive and other negative set of cables, and that's everything. Now there's one piece that this kit is missing, and it is the cable that goes from the alternator to the positive side of the passenger side battery. They offer it as an option you can buy as an extra. I didn't realize that, so I didn't order it, but I definitely recommend you do that. It really doesn't make sense to replace all these cables and then not replace the one cable that connects your batteries to the charging system. So here's a nice close-up of the diagram that came with this kit. I really like it, really easy to understand, but you can also see on the right there where it does show you the optional pieces, which I did not get. Something definitely worth noting is that they actually have a nut that's just there to hold the bolt in during shipping and packaging. There's actually a nylock nut you want to use when you install it on the truck. Now that everything's unpackaged, let's get to work. So we're going to start by removing the negative from both batteries. And once those are off, we're going to move over to the positive. It doesn't matter which order you do this, but you do have to take the negatives off before you move to the positives. Once the battery is disconnected, I went over to the crossover cable. It goes across the top of the radiator there. Next, I removed the top part of the airbox. You don't need to do this, but it definitely makes it a lot easier, gives you more room to work. And there's really no effort to take this thing off. It's just the one hose clamp, the few clips around the box, and you take off the 2 sensors there on the intake. You gotta remember though to put those sensors back on, otherwise you'll notice right away something's wrong when you start the truck back up. So now that we got some room, we can move these cables around the intake here. So all these cables are together in one loom and they're all taped. So I disconnected the alternator cable, even though I'm not replacing it here, just to take the whole thing out in one piece, and then I separated it afterwards and reused the alternator cable. But again, if you're doing this, I definitely recommend you get that alternator cable. There's no reason not to. So next I just started laying the crossover cable in. We're not really ready for it yet. I just kind of wanted to see how things were going to fit in here. On a side note, these grip mats that I'm holding my tools in here, these things are great. It's great for working on engines. The amount of tools and bolts and stuff I used to drop when you balance things on the fan shroud and stuff, It's so good. They're not a sponsor or anything. I just have one of these and love it, so passing on the info. So next we're going to remove the negative connection on the fender on the passenger side here. And once you're done with that, there's another negative on the engine block down on the passenger side under here. You got to get from underneath the truck. And once those are out, you can pull out the negative terminal altogether. Next up, we're going to move to the positive terminal on the driver's side. First, we're going to remove this little connector at the firewall, and then there's another connection here at the fuse box. The last one is definitely the most difficult one to get to, and it's the big cable going down to the starter. Some people think it's easiest to go from underneath, some like going from the fender well. Find a way that works for you. It's not easy regardless. So moving on to the driver's side negative, this one has three. There's the one on the fender, there's one on the engine block in front of the ECU right here, and then there's also one attaching to the frame which you can get in the driver's side fender, and it is bolted on right there. And that's it. Pull out the last terminal and cables and we're ready to start putting stuff back together. So here you can see my stock terminals are completely trashed. It's definitely time to replace them. And this other wire on here is the one for the alternator that goes on the passenger side. So if you're like me and you didn't buy that wire, you got to move this one over. Otherwise, you don't have to worry about that. So something to note is the P and the N for positive and negative on these terminals because they are different sizes. So next up, I just kind of loosely fit everything together by terminal just so I can bring them over in sets. They already kind of package them together in sets for you, but this is just the way I like to do it. You could definitely bring it over wire by wire and install it that way. It's all preference, so whatever works best for you. So one thing you do have to move over from the stock harness to the new harness is that connector we removed from the firewall on the driver's side. Unwrap it from the stock harness and then feed it into the split loom on the new harness. It's also important to remember the location of where those split from the original harness, because on the one side it rides all the way down to the starter, but on the side with the firewall it actually Ys from the harness a little bit early, so you want to try and keep it roughly the same so you can still reach the stock plug. Now that I got everything kind of put together, we can start installing it into the truck. So I started with the passenger side positive, and on this one we're going to have the crossover cable and the alternator cable. Now if you didn't opt to get the alternator cable like I did, you're going to have to remount that ring terminal because the bolt in the battery terminal is larger than the stock one. And then onto the negative, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to have the one that goes onto the fender and the one that goes on the side of the block. So you tighten them up and we're done there. So once I got the wires that go under the intake, I decided to put the top of the airbox back on just for reference to make sure I didn't put anything in the way and it could seat properly. Then onto the driver's side, so we got the positive. We're going to have the plug that goes near the firewall. We're going to have the one that goes down to the starter and the other one that goes over to the fuse box. And the crossover cable. Definitely do not forget the crossover cable. So because this one has the most wires going to it, this is the only terminal I couldn't fit the wires through the little sleeve in the boot. What I opted to do instead was to just mount the terminal without the boot, and then I cut that sleeve and just kind of place it over top. I haven't had any issues with it falling off, and I figure it's still more protected than just leaving it open. And then onto the driver's side negative, and remember this one has three, so we're going to reattach them in the same spots: the small one on the fender, the one down on the engine block, and the third on the frame. And once we're done with that, we're going to move on passenger side negative, and we just have the one on the fender and then one on the engine block. So now that all new wires are in, before I tightened everything down, I put on the terminal protectors. I don't typically put these on, or at least I don't buy them, but since they came with the kit, I figured I'd put them on. I don't know how much they could possibly do, to be honest, but I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. If you guys have opinions on these, please let me know in the comments below, because I'm definitely curious what everyone else thinks. And that pretty much wraps it up. We're just going to tighten down the terminals, put the boots on, make sure all the cables are away from hot or moving surfaces, go nuts with zip ties like I did, and make sure you don't have an issue in the future. And then once everything's done, a quick startup to make sure everything's working. And that'll wrap up this project. Really nice kit, not too bad to install. Really a good upgrade for this truck. Not the flashiest or the most fun, but worthwhile in my opinion. As always, thank you guys for watching. Really appreciate it. If you want to see more, please subscribe. I'll see you guys next time.